4 years have been erased from your life, and you don't remember a single second of that time. You have no idea where you've been, what happened to you, or why you're still alive to return. This isn't just a story about a disappearance. This is a story about a return that forced the entire United States to ask what really happened in the Uinta forest. A 17-year-old girl entered the Crystal Lake Trailhead on a summer afternoon. 4 years later, she was found in a cabin that doesn't appear on any map. A gaunt, emaciated figure who couldn't even remember who she was, what happened to her, and who made those 4 years vanish. The most terrifying part of this story is the silence. The silence of Utah's mountains and forests, and the silence of the only survivor. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. On the afternoon of August 14, 2017, the Crystal Lake Trailhead area in the Uinta Mountains of Utah maintained a steady flow of hikers until around after 3 p.m. When most groups had completed their routes and began leaving the area before the temperature dropped sharply in the evening. This was the time when 17-year-old Emily Hart appeared at the parking lot with a small backpack, a water bottle, a thin jacket tied around her waist, and a paper map of the Crystal Wall Lakes area. Emily's goal, as confirmed by her family, was to complete a short hiking route lasting a few hours before sunset. It was also a trail she had hiked once before during summer camp the previous year. Familiar enough to feel safe, but not so easy that she would become complacent about the terrain conditions. Security cameras at the trailhead captured Emily leaving the parking area and entering the main trail at 3:42 p.m., showing her hiking alone, without bulky gear, moving at a steady pace, and displaying no unusual behavior. After this point, the last recorded sighting of Emily came from 2 hikers returning in the opposite direction on the Wall Lake Loop. They reported encountering a young woman matching the description, tall and slender, with her hair tied in a high ponytail, carrying a green backpack, standing at the junction branching off to the Lake Loop Trail and checking her map for directions. Emily asked them about the length of the route and the estimated time to complete the loop, then continued walking in the direction they indicated. This was the last time anyone witnessed Emily at the scene. From around 6:30 to 7 p.m., the family expected Emily to exit the forest and contact them once she reached her car. But no calls or messages came through. At first, they assumed she might be running late, out of signal range, or stopping to take photos. However, by 8 p.m., repeated calls went straight to voicemail. Emily's phone signal showed no reconnection to the network, and there was no data activity. By this time, the Crystal Lake area was becoming deserted, with no visitors reporting seeing a young woman hiking back late. The family continued trying to reach her for nearly 2 hours while checking basic possibilities, such as Emily returning via a different route, getting a ride from someone, visiting friends, or wandering into a busier area. There were no signs she had left the mountain or returned to populated areas. At 10:17 p.m., after confirming Emily had not appeared at any familiar locations and had no contact with friends, the family was forced to report a missing person case at Crystal Lake Trailhead to local law enforcement. Less than an hour later, the report was escalated to high priority, and Utah Search and Rescue was immediately activated, assembling that same night at the trailhead to set up a temporary command center. In the first 24 hours, SEAR's priority was to determine the most likely route, based on Emily's departure time from the trailhead and the direction described by witnesses. A fan-shaped search plan was deployed from the starting point, gradually expanding along the branches leading to the Wall Lake Loop, Clyde Lake, and connecting trails to the Middle Basin area. K-9 units were brought into the forest at first light, followed by specialized ground teams, searching for small traces like scratches on the ground, fabric scraps, footprints, or broken branches in the direction of human movement. Concurrently, a drone team was deployed to scan aerial images of open surfaces, slopes, and areas around the lakes, where calm water might reflect unusual signs. A sheriff's helicopter was also mobilized for high-altitude sweeps to detect standout colors or movement amid the layered green landscape and gray rocks. As the command team analyzed topographic maps, they identified high-risk areas for priority in the first 12 hours. Steep rock faces northeast of Crystal Lake, small marshy spots on the edge of Middle Basin, seasonal glacial lake remnants, and narrow rock crevices that often make escaping the main trail difficult. Teams immediately split to approach each area, conducting continuous searches, following the listen, look, call protocol, hoping the victim could respond if trapped in the dark or on steep terrain. However, throughout the first day of searching, K9 units picked up no stable scent of Emily, drones recorded no distinctive clothing colors, and ground teams found no physical signs like footprints or dropped items. By the second day, the search area was fully expanded toward Wall Lake Basin, based on the last witness sighting of Emily, checking her map at the junction. The entire Lake Loop Trail was scanned segment by segment, from easily visible spots to dense, less visited wooded areas, but teams still discovered no evidence that Emily had passed through. The end-of-day report on the second day confirmed no authenticated traces, no fresh footprints, no fabric pieces, no slide marks or impact signs on rocks. Search teams spent another day expanding to side trails connecting to Long Lake and the lower Middle Basin, but the lack of directional data forced SAR to gradually scale back to focus on the highest probability routes. By the end of the third day, efforts continued but shifted to targeted search mode rather than comprehensive, as no new information helped pinpoint a focal area. Though hope remained, SAR was compelled to reduce operations after 72 hours due to the absence of physical evidence indicating Emily's movement or final location in the complex Uinta mountain forest. In the weeks following the conclusion of the initial search campaign, Emily Hart's missing person file was transferred to the long-term monitoring unit of Summit County Law Enforcement, where procedures for cases in mountainous terrain require dependence on weather cycles, particularly the snowmelt period in late spring and early summer. Specialized search teams coordinated with the Forest Service to establish seasonal sweep plans, focusing on areas previously inaccessible due to snow cover or thick ice hiding rock faces and side trails. Each year, as melting snow exposed bedrock, tree roots, and formerly ice-covered zones, a small team returned to Crystal Lake and connecting routes to Wall Lake Basin to look for any remaining signs of Emily. However, the first post-winter sweeps in 2018 yielded no results. No faded clothing left on rocks, no abandoned backpack, no drag marks or footprints embedded in soft ground, all factors that typically help locate where someone might have had an accident or veered off the main path. As the case gained community attention, 3 large-scale volunteer-led searches, organized by Friends, residents, and hiking groups, took place consecutively in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Hundreds of participants divided the area into small search grids, scanning every square meter of forest, sometimes taking a full week to check steep rocks, marshes, and lake edges that SAR couldn't thoroughly access in the early days. Despite continuously increasing scope and manpower, the outcomes were the same. No physical evidence found. Occasionally, items discarded by other hikers even caused confusion, requiring cross-verification multiple times. By the second year after Emily's disappearance, investigators compiled all collected data, search maps, K9 data, drone flight paths, aerial photos, and witness reports. Re-examination showed that Emily's feasible routes had been swept multiple times in the first 2 years, with no significant gaps large enough to miss an injured victim without leaving traces. These analyses led to the assessment that if Emily had been trapped or immobilized by an accident, SAR or the community likely would have found at least a scrap of fabric, a glove, or any personal item. The complete absence of physical signs began raising various hypotheses, but all lacked basis for expanding the investigation in new directions. As leads on evidence grew scarce and terrain-based searches yielded no new information, Emily's missing person file was re-evaluated under Utah state criteria for priority classification. By late 2019, after more than 2 years of continuous sweeps and 3 failed community campaigns, authorities officially reclassified the case as a cold case. This meant no permanent search teams. Specialized units would only return for weather cycle sweeps or new witness tips, and direct investigative resources would shift to cases with higher resolution potential. Nonetheless, the file remained in the central system, ready for reactivation if matching leads emerged from the time of Emily's disappearance. For the family and local community, the cold case designation not only highlighted years of fruitless effort, but also reinforced the reality of no concrete data on Emily's final location in the Uinta range. An informational void, making the disappearance one of the most perplexing unsolved cases in Utah's mountainous region in recent years. Nearly 4 years after the case was classified as a cold case, events took an unexpected turn in late September 2021 when a Utah wildfire hotshots crew was checking for smoldering fire traces in deep forest near Upper Setting Road, several miles as the crow flies from Crystal Lake Trailhead and outside the areas swept by SAR in the early years. During the terrain sweep, the crew spotted a thin column of smoke rising from amid dense pine stands, originating from a low wooden structure hidden under the canopy. A small cabin that did not appear on any Forest Service management maps or records. Noting this was an area with no legal camping activity and no official access path, the crew leader decided to approach the cabin to assess fire spread risk. Upon nearing, they observed signs of recent habitation, warm smoke from the chimney, unburned wood in the stove, and the cabin door slightly ajar. While conducting a safety check, crew members were startled to see a young woman in an exhausted state emerge from the darkness inside. She staggered, unsteady on her feet, her body so emaciated that arm and collarbones protruded visibly, with roughly cut short hair and pale skin from prolonged lack of sunlight. Faced with strangers, the girl appeared wary, responding slowly and showing signs of fear toward the surroundings. After initial assessment that she could not leave on her own, the fire crew immediately contacted the coordination center while notifying law enforcement and emergency medical units. A paramedic team was dispatched to the cabin, stabilizing her condition before transporting her directly to Salt Lake County via specialized vehicle. Upon hospital arrival, intake noted the girl carried no identification, could not provide full information, and responded only in fragmented sentences. Based on appearance, estimated age, and details from old missing person records, medical staff coordinated with police to take and compare fingerprints. Results confirmed she was Emily Hart, the young woman who vanished nearly 4 years earlier at Crystal Lake Trailhead, leaving no clues since. Information was immediately relayed to the family and investigators, while the cabin where she was found was cordoned off as a key crime scene, with the entire surrounding area sealed to preserve evidence per standard protocol. Though no details yet clarified the context of Emily's reappearance, the discovery of a long-term missing victim in a cabin non-existent on any map immediately created a major turning point, making the cabin the focal point of the entire investigation. From here, Emily was transferred to the specialized medical evaluation area of Salt Lake County Hospital, where the medical team conducted a comprehensive examination right in the first hours to determine her physical condition after many years of disappearance. Preliminary results showed that she was falling into severe malnutrition, weight below the minimum standard, body fat ratio near alarm level, and marked muscle mass reduction, reflecting prolonged protein deficiency. Emily's skin was pale and thin, with uneven hyperpigmented patches, typical of someone with insignificant outdoor light exposure over a long period. Particularly, vitamin D tests showed extremely low results, along with more brittle bones compared to her age, suggesting that she had lived most of the time in an environment lacking natural light. In addition, the medical team noted many old healed wounds not properly treated, thin long scars along both wrists, shallow cuts around the ankles, and some calloused skin areas, indicating the presence of binding devices or repeated friction over a long time. Soft tissue analysis around the scars showed that most had formed from many months to several years ago, consistent with the time Emily was missing, while reflecting a recurring cycle, meaning the binding marks were applied not just once, but in separate phases, typical for cases of long-term confinement or movement control. Some minor subcutaneous injuries, including deep-healed bruises, were assessed as results of light or medium impact force, possibly due to collision with hard surfaces or being grabbed, pulled hard while the victim's resistance was weak. Basic functional examination showed Emily reacting slowly to sudden sounds or people approaching too close, while tending to avoid strong light contact and withdraw when there are many people in the room, signs consistent with the disorder pattern due to confinement in restricted space. Psychological analysis performed after her physical condition stabilized more, showed Emily having typical reflexes of long-term controlled victims, speaking softly, frequently looking towards the door before answering, asking permission before performing simple actions like drinking water, and trying to observe the counterpart's attitude to guess reactions. These manifestations were evaluated as consequences of the forced adaptation process in a high behavior control environment, where the victim must adjust actions based on the supervisor's expectations or requirements. Emily also showed extreme alertness when hearing heavy footsteps or loud door closing, causing the medical team to minimize noise and limit the number of people present in the room. The initial notes on Emily's statement, coordinated by psychologists and investigators in a temporarily stable state, showed she remembered disjointedly about the time inside the cabin, but clearly confirmed an important factor. She was not there voluntarily and had been confined in that space for a long time. She stated that entering and exiting the cabin was not her decision. The times of exposure to outside air were limited, and all activities were tied to the presence or instructions from a man appearing in irregular cycles. Although the statement at this stage was still incoherent and strongly influenced by post-rescue stress, it was sufficient to affirm that the confinement was real, consistent with all recorded medical and psychological signs. The consistency between examination results, injury analysis, reflex behaviors, and Emily's initial descriptions established the first professional basis to affirm that she had undergone a long-term control process in an environment with limited light, limited nutrition, and under control from others. A key conclusion for determining the nature of the case. Immediately after the initial medical report confirmed that Emily Hart had lived in the cabin for a long time, the Summit County Investigation Force coordinated with the FBI to seal off the area where she was found, establishing a security perimeter with a wide radius around the cabin to preserve any traces possibly related to the confinement process. The crime scene technical team began by identifying all natural access paths leading to the cabin, noting that this structure was located in a hidden position behind old pine ridges and not directly connected to any official trails. Investigators quickly realized the cabin could only be accessed via two small trails, one path running back towards Upper Setting Road and a narrower path leading deep down to the eastern depression, where the steep terrain and many loose rocks made vehicle movement difficult. Analysis of the compacted soil layer and footprint depth showed that the main path into the cabin had been used recently. In the surrounding area, the investigative agency proceeded to map the exterior by marking the position of each trail, each auxiliary footpath, and unusual sunken land areas that could be traces of pickup trucks or small vehicles that had passed through. Faint tire tracks on the dry ground showed a four-wheel vehicle had come right to the edge of the tree canopy, stopping about a few dozen meters from the cabin, a distance sufficient to obscure aerial view and avoid creating a clear path. In addition, the crime scene team also discovered many scattered shoe prints around the cabin, all matching a large size and shape, completely different from Emily's foot size. These shoe prints appeared in many fixed positions near the door, next to the outdoor fireplace, the dry wood storage area, and along the entry-exit trail, indicating these were positions regularly accessed by the cabin user out of habit. To determine the level of human intervention in the cabin's architecture, the investigation group built an exterior diagram noting the wood material, roof reinforcement style, position of sealed windows, and screw material. The exterior wood surface clearly showed saw cuts and uniform hand-planing marks, demonstrating intentional intervention rather than natural degradation of an abandoned cabin. New wood connections, especially at the door hinges, front roof, and window boarding, showed the cabin had undergone at least 2 repairs in the past few years. Positions with moisture and windproof sealant were done with modern materials, types not available in old cabins commonly found in the Uinta forest region, helping to reinforce the assessment that the cabin user had actively maintained it to ensure shielding and safety against weather. The overall exterior crime scene evaluation allowed the investigative agency to assess that the cabin was not a forgotten or ownerless structure, but a purposefully selected location, maintained and used for a long time by an individual familiar with the terrain, capable of moving by small vehicle into the area, and with a habit of periodic structural maintenance. These factors created the foundation to determine the cabin was not just a chance shelter, but possibly a central location directly related to Emily Hart's prolonged disappearance. Inside the cabin, the crime scene survey team proceeded to zone the space to determine the usage function of each area and the level of human intervention during Emily's confinement period. The simple interior structure consisted of a single room, but through detailed observation, it could be divided into 3 clear functional areas. The sleeping area, right in the left corner, with a rough wooden bed, thin sagging mattress, and old frayed fabric blanket. The cooking area, right against the eastern wall, with a small stove, pot rack, metal water barrel, along with a few simple eating utensils, and the food storage area, right by the entrance, consisting of wooden shelves holding canned goods, dry food bags, and small items used for long-term food preservation. All arranged in minimalist logic, serving one person with limited freedom, no signs of full living like a long-term residence. The items showed the cabin was used periodically. Firewood in the stove was evenly split and stacked high, consistent with the skill of someone accustomed to using an axe. Water in the container showed signs of recent replacement. The metal ash basket was neatly placed next to the stove, indicating someone cleaned the fireplace periodically. The position of items on the food storage shelf was arranged by group: canned goods, dry food, and small utensils, reflecting repeated organizational habits, no signs of randomness or chaos like in an abandoned cabin. At the entrance area, the survey group discovered a closing-opening mechanism reinforced with a homemade metal bar installed on the outside, allowing someone from outside to completely lock the cabin without entering. The bar surface had smooth wear marks and worn pressure points from repeated use, while the door hinges had an additional reinforcing wood layer from the outside, creating greater bearing force when the door was slammed shut. Inside the cabin, there was no corresponding opening mechanism. When locked from outside, the person inside could not escape on their own, which fit the confinement model rather than free living. On the floor next to the door, there was a faint mark, likely a large shoe print formed over time, when the cabin user often stood in that exact position to operate the lock. At the cooking area, the amount of utensils present was minimal, only enough for one person, and many of them were old, but preserved clean, no signs of dust accumulation over years. This showed the cabin was not abandoned, but had regular visits from someone with a habit of maintaining the space at a basic level, suitable for a supervised person. Other observations further reinforced the assessment that the cabin was not the controller's main residence: no second bed, no clothing, personal items, identification papers, communication devices, or signs of daily living, like repair tools, fresh food, or diverse cooking utensils. No winter emergency supplies appeared, which would be mandatory if this were truly a long-term adult residence. The cabin only contained minimal canned food and simple items, completely fitting the model of a temporary confinement place rather than a home. Synthesizing all interior records, the survey team concluded the cabin was used as a purposeful destination with the goal of maintaining the existence of one person inside without providing conditions for them to live fully independently. All signs, from item arrangement, maintenance level, space function to door locking mechanism, showed the cabin did not belong to the perpetrator's settled or temporary lifestyle, but was a location used to isolate the victim, while the controller visited periodically to provide necessities and maintain confinement conditions. The forensic team proceeded with the phase of collecting and analyzing in detail all samples at the cabin right after completing the interior survey, focusing on tracing traces of visitors and long-term confinement signs, possibly related to Emily's control process. First, the DNA group began by collecting hair and skin cell samples scattered at high-contact areas next to the bed entrance area, wooden table edge, and stove handle. On the old blanket at the bed, the forensic team found 3 long hairs matching Emily's description, but under the bed edge, 2 short, dark brown hairs appeared that did not match the victim. Both were collected for DNA comparison. On the wooden table surface, technicians used fluorescent powder and special illumination lamps to detect many faint fingerprints, including 2 matching large-size groups commonly seen in adult males. At the stove area, fingerprints were clearer due to soot, helping to collect some skin cell samples of sufficient quality for analysis. On the door and outside metal bar, the technical team used specialized fingerprint detection chemicals and collected a series of strong pressure fingerprints, proving the user frequently operated with great force. All DNA samples were sealed according to strict procedures and sent to the lab for mixture separation, matching ratio evaluation with the victim, and searching for strange individuals possibly related to building the cabin or confining Emily. Parallel to collecting biological samples, the footprint analysis team proceeded to record boot prints around the cabin and adjacent trails. At the path leading from the forest edge to the cabin, the soft ground from melted snow left some quite clear imprints, large shoe form, deep sole pattern in heavy trekking shoe model for rocky terrain. Specialists compared the sole pattern with common shoe sample databases and determined this was likely size 11-12 men's shoes, belonging to a less common group due to heavy weight. The deep imprint direction showed the shoe wearer approached the cabin from the northwest and left along the same route, demonstrating repeated movement habits over a long time. Smaller footprints corresponding to Emily's build appeared faintly nearby, showing she only moved in a very narrow range around the door and rarely stepped far from the cabin, consistent with controlled movement. At the doorstep, the forensic team collected the perpetrator's shoe prints, overlapping many times into layers, showing this was a familiar stopping point each time operating the lock from outside. All boot prints were cast in plaster and 3D photographed for later matching. Next step, the evidence specialist group proceeded to collect all ropes, cords, and items possibly used to bind the victim. In the corner near the food storage area, there was a roll of gray 550 paracord, 12 meters long, with the end cut by a sharp tool. On a short cord segment fallen under the bed, the forensic team found a double-loop knot, often used in situations needing to fix wrists or ankles, but still allowing quick tightness adjustment. Another cord segment was frayed and had wear marks from prolonged friction, which could reflect the victim's attempts to escape. All cords were collected with fiber traces, dust layers, adhered skin cells for DNA analysis, and product origin tracing. Near the bed foot, the technical group found a metal hook handmade attached to the wooden leg, a sign the cabin had been modified to fix binding cords in cases where the perpetrator wanted to control the victim's limbs for a long time. Checking tools leaving marks on the door and hinges also showed the cabin was not as simple as it appeared. On the door's inner surface, there were deep V-shaped gouges running vertically, created by a pointed metal tool, possibly a chisel or large screwdriver. These marks were of a nature breaking the wood structure in an inward to outward pressure direction, consistent with descriptions of a confined person trying to open the door or create gaps. Conversely, on the outer hinge surface and reinforcing bar, the forensic team identified screw marks tightened multiple times by the same tool, possibly a large flathead screwdriver. The metal surface had small parallel scratches, showing the installer had operating skills but not professional. The tightening marks were straight and even, consistent with someone patient and with periodic maintenance habits. When further analyzing tool marks around the doorframe, the team noted the hinges were replaced about 2-3 years ago, based on shallow oxidation level and screw style no longer widely produced. This showed the cabin was purposefully maintained during Emily's missing period, reinforcing the hypothesis that the cabin was an intentional confinement point, not built, then abandoned. Another discovery related to maintenance habits was cut marks on the woodpile, placed a few meters from the cabin. The cut patterns on the wood surface had uniform grooves characteristic of a small chainsaw blade, not a machete or axe. The appraisal team compared the cut marks and assessed the cabin user had a habit of using the same type of chainsaw, likely a small gas-powered one for personal purposes. The consistent cut patterns on each wood piece showed the splitting process was done systematically, not hastily. In addition, at the wood stacking area, there were metal nail pin traces and wooden bars arranged in straight lines, clearly revealing the style of someone accustomed to outdoor work, like maintenance personnel, forestry, or labor professions requiring frequent cutting tools. This opened the possibility that the perpetrator was someone familiar with the Uinta mountain terrain and had experience in building repairing small wooden structures. In the cabin, a wooden block table form had edges planed smooth evenly by a specialized planing tool, nose demonstrating higher precision than an average person could perform. The surface had no splinters or offset grooves, proving the operator had experience or worked in carpentry or jobs requiring cutting tool skills. Synthesizing all forensic traces, the investigation team recorded the cabin contained diverse information about visitors, from DNA, boot prints, tool marks, to specific maintenance habits. Although unable to identify the perpetrator's identity on site yet, the consistency in samples, large shoe marks, tool use skills, door locking method, maintenance cycle, and traces on binding cords showed this place was a purposefully operated location, controlled by an individual familiar with forest mountain terrain and capable of maintaining a solitary confinement base for a long time without detection. All details collected from the cabin became an important foundation for subsequent investigation steps to determine who built, maintained, and used this place to control Emily throughout many years of disappearance. Immediately after compiling sufficient forensic data from the cabin, the investigation team returned to review the entire initial 2017 search records of Utah Search and Rescue to determine whether any signs had appeared earlier but were overlooked or not properly connected. Cross-referencing data from the time of the disappearance became particularly important after the cabin, which was not shown on any official maps, was confirmed to be within a radius of just a few miles from the first year's search area. In the SAR archives, the analysis team found records of a single column of smoke spotted by the helicopter crew on August 16, 2017, approximately 2 days after Emily went missing. At the time, SAR assessed it as late-night campfire burning by hikers, since the smoke column was thin and steady, showing no signs of distress. However, when rechecking the GPS coordinates, the smoke was located precisely in the dense forested area where the cabin was later discovered. This was considered a valuable finding because it indicated the cabin may have been operational right from the initial days after Emily's disappearance, but since there were no maps confirming any structure in the area, the smoke signal was not pursued further. Next, the investigation team reviewed ground photos taken by the long-range SR team in the first 72 hours. One photo captured a large footprint on a secondary trail heading northwest, initially attributed to a volunteer team member due to lack of comparison basis. Now, when compared to the boot print recovered at the cabin, sharing the same deep tread pattern, same edge wear, and approximately the same size, the analysis team determined it was highly likely from the same pair of shoes. This identification became notable because the route leading to the old footprint aligned with the direction the boot prints around the cabin indicated the perpetrator frequently used. This established a spatial link between the 2017 footprint and the current cabin activity, strengthening the hypothesis that the perpetrator had moved through that area right in the early days of Emily's captivity. To further solidify the context, the investigation team reconstructed the traffic and civilian activity timeline along Mirror Lake Highway, the main road in and out of the Crystal Lake Trailhead area, on the day Emily went missing. Traffic cameras did not capture any notable suspicious vehicles, but a road maintenance worker's report noted a dark-colored pickup truck driving slowly at mile marker 17 around 6 p.m., heading into the forest rather than toward residential areas. This timing was not long after the point when Emily was expected to leave the trail, and the vehicle's departure from the main road in a less traveled direction matched the behavior of someone familiar with the backcountry. SAR data at the time did not link this vehicle to the disappearance because there was no report of suspicious activity. However, when considered alongside the cabin and boot print, the vehicle formed an additional link between the activity of an unfamiliar individual in the area and signs of a secret detention structure. The next review focused on the fan-shaped search map that SAR deployed in the first 48 hours. One post-event analysis showed that the northwest sector where the cabin was located was only preliminarily scanned by helicopter in poor lighting conditions, with no ground teams penetrating deeply due to dense terrain and no phone signals or scattered clothing to guide them. Documents also noted several unmarked side trails, often created by hunters or locals, and one of those trails led close to the cabin. This demonstrated that the cabin was right on the edge of the search area, but overlooked due to the lack of official structures on maps. Finally, when the team summarized all the old data and cross-referenced it with discoveries inside the cabin, the conclusion was that multiple related signals had appeared right in the early days of the disappearance. The unusual smoke column, large boot print, abnormal northwest route, but without a specific anchor point like the cabin to connect the signs, they were all treated as isolated data. Now, with the cabin confirmed as the primary scene, those 2017 signals were re-evaluated from a completely different perspective and revealed to be direct clues that had been missed because the context at the time did not allow for proper identification of their true nature. After determining that the cabin had been operational right from the early days of Emily's disappearance, and that there were multiple signs of repeated perpetrator movement around the area, the investigation team shifted focus to tracing all possible access routes the captor may have used over the 4 years. Creating a high-resolution topographic map around the cabin revealed only 2 feasible routes leading to the location without excessive bushwhacking: the Upper Setting Road from the north and the Soapstone Basin from the west. Both routes were dirt roads, typically used by hunters, forest rangers, or those familiar with the terrain, and neither was an official tourist route or marked trail. This characteristic made them convenient choices for someone wanting to access the cabin discreetly without drawing attention. The investigation team used GIS data to assess vehicle accessibility and confirmed both routes were passable for pickup trucks or high-clearance SUVs, especially in late summer, the time of Emily's disappearance. After narrowing down the locations, the team began retrieving traffic and forest management camera footage from 2017-2021 along Mirror Lake Highway, Upper Setting Road, and Soapstone Basin. Although camera density in the Uinta forest was sparse, the main traffic monitoring system had recorded tens of thousands of vehicle passages over the 4 years. The analysis unit filtered according to criteria: vehicles appearing frequently on the 2 rarely used dirt roads, vehicles with travel times matching key milestones in the disappearance case, and vehicles matching the dark color description from the 2017 road maintenance workers report. The team used license plate classification algorithms to eliminate tourist vehicles that appeared only once, ranger vehicles, and maintenance unit vehicles. The remaining results were 23 plates with abnormal repeat frequency on Upper Setting Road and 11 on Soapstone Basin during 2017-2021. These plates belonged to pickup trucks and older SUVs from 2000-2010, suitable for forest roads. Among them, Some vehicles appeared cyclically, mostly in late afternoon or early dawn, times with little traffic. Notably, only 3 plates appeared on both Upper Setting Road and Soapstone Basin in the same year, indicating the owner was familiar with multiple access routes to the cabin. The next step was for the investigation team to align the travel timelines of these plates with key dates in Emily's missing person file. The first plate appeared on Upper Setting Road just hours after the missing person report was received on the night of August 14, 2017, then continued to appear sporadically 7-9 times per year, but each time only within a 1-2 hour window. The second plate appeared 3 days after the SAR team ended the hot search phase and was consistently recorded over the 4 years with higher density in winter, suggesting the owner visited the cabin regardless of weather conditions. The third plate had data overlapping with the 2018 SAR seasonal search resumption after snowmelt, when cameras recorded this vehicle leaving Soapstone Basin before dawn on a day with helicopter sweeps in the area. This led the investigation team to conclude the owner may have monitored law enforcement activity to avoid detection. When cross-referencing with the witness report of a dark pickup truck on Mirror Lake Highway around 6 p.m. on the day Emily went missing, the analysis team noted that 2 of the 3 suspect vehicles matched the description: older dark-painted pickup trucks with long beds and industrial-style wheels. Based on travel time between Mirror Lake Highway and the turnoff to Upper Setting Road, the team reconstructed a plausible timeline. If the vehicle in the 2017 report continued into the forest in the direction noted by the witness, it could appear on the Upper Setting Road camera about 20-30 minutes later, a timing that matched the data for the first suspect plate. This reinforced the hypothesis that from the time of Emily's disappearance, the vehicle owner had used Upper Setting Road as the primary route to access the cabin. To increase accuracy, the investigation team also used a forest road simulation model under dusk lighting conditions to estimate appropriate travel speeds, and the results showed the suspect vehicle's timeline fully aligned with the possibility of the perpetrator transporting Emily from Crystal Lake Trailhead to the cabin in under an hour. The connection of feasible routes, 4 years of camera data, abnormal appearance frequency of the plates, and vehicle model similarity to the 2017 report indicated clues converging on a pattern of repeated behavior by an individual habitually using these 2 remote roads to access the cabin, while confirming that from the time of the disappearance, related traffic signs existed but were overlooked due to incomplete data context at the time. Based on the 3 plates with abnormal appearance frequency at Upper Setting Road and Soapstone Basin during 2017-2021, the investigation team extracted the full list of vehicle owners with models, paint colors, and years matching descriptions from traffic camera data. In total, 7 vehicle owners in Summit County and Wasatch County had dark-painted pickup trucks or SUVs from 2010, high-clearance, large off-road style tires, capable of stable operation on deep forest roads. The investigation team categorized them according to criteria: distance between residents and the 2 access routes to the cabin, frequency of forest vehicle use, work or activity, history related to the Uinta Mountains terrain, and degree of match with the boot print and tool marks recovered at the cabin. The first owner was a campground maintenance worker at Smith and Morehouse, frequently traveling Upper Setting Road in summer to check trails. However, GPS data from his vehicle, voluntarily provided, showed it always followed official duty routes, never penetrating to the cabin marker area, and all camera appearances matched confirmed Forest Service maintenance logs. He was quickly ruled out. The second owner was a hunter residing in Camas, owning a 2008 SUV. He claimed to enter the forest during deer and elk seasons, but all hunting permits confirmed no activity in August 2017, nor any travel matching the disappearance timing. Alibi for the day Emily went missing was strengthened by work schedule and 2 co-worker confirmations, so he was removed from the suspect list. The third owner was a fly fishing tour guide, accustomed to navigating clients along streams in Soapstone Basin. Although his vehicle appeared sporadically on cameras, detailed timing cross-checks showed most were daytime. Additionally, he had a GPS tracker for tour insurance, and extracted data showed the vehicle did not follow routes to the cabin. He was also ruled out. The fourth owner was a retired high school teacher living in Heber City, who frequently drove for scenic drives according to his wife. However, the investigation team found his vehicle appeared only once on Upper Setting Road in 2019, and given his physical condition and age, involvement in secretly building a cabin in the forest was deemed unlikely. These factors kept him off the priority suspect list. The fifth owner was a recently retired Forest Service employee, previously reprimanded for unauthorized extended camping. He was initially considered potentially involved due to terrain knowledge and off-hours forest activity habits. But phone location data placed him in Idaho at the time of Emily's disappearance, and the cabin boot print did not match his usual size 9 shoes. He was thus ruled out. The sixth owner was a construction worker on scattered projects in the Wasatch area. He owned an older dark green pickup truck recorded 4 times on Soapstone Basin in 2020. During interview, he stated he used the road as a shortcut to private timber projects on the Western Ridge. Financial records showed jobs during that period, and phone location logs matched work schedules, with no overlaps on the 2017 disappearance date. His shoe size was 10.5, while cabin boot prints indicated size 11.12. With this data, the sixth individual was also ruled out. With the first 6 subjects eliminated from the narrowed list, only the 7th remained, Caleb Rourke, 39 years old, with scattered residences between Summit County and Dutchess County, having almost no fixed address beyond a P.O. box registered in Oakley. Rourke owned an older Ford F-250 pickup in charcoal dark, exactly matching the model and color from 2017 traffic cameras and the Mirror Lake Highway maintenance worker's description. More notably, camera data showed Rourke's vehicle had the highest frequency among the 3 suspect plates, spanning 2017 to 2021, with regular forest entries about 2-3 times per month, including bad weather days, uncommon for typical forest road users. As the background check team began analyzing his personal history, multiple factors immediately made Caleb the prime suspect. Police records showed Rourke had been fined for unauthorized camping in Uinta Wasatch National Forest in 2014 and 2016, both involving temporary wooden structures. Forest Service reports described hand-built camping style using rough-hewn pine, similar to the cabin construction surveyed by the team, especially in wood planing and metal spike usage. Additionally, Rourke's sporadic occupations included seasonal construction helper, sawmill assistant, and occasional drainage digging on mountain roads. These jobs made him familiar with wood-cutting tools, matching small chainsaw marks and wood shavings found at the cabin. Regarding lifestyle, Rourke's tax records showed no stable employment. He often withdrew cash from various locations around Mirror Lake Highway and appeared in sparsely populated towns near Uinta Mountains. One local police report even noted Rourke sleeping in his vehicle for weeks at forest pullouts. When the investigation team mapped his activity, a notable recurring pattern emerged. Many purchases of canned goods and cheap essentials from convenience stores in Camas and Heber City occurred in timeframes matching camera records of Rourke's vehicle on Upper Setting Road. These items included canned food, dry noodles, small fuel canisters, exactly the supplies found in the cabin. Furthermore, traffic records showed 3 instances of police stopping Rourke for minor violations late at night or early morning. Matching times the cabin boot prints indicated the visitor often departed in darkness. Cross-referencing all alibi data, Rourke had no solid evidence for the day Emily went missing. He claimed to be at a friend's ranch in Dutchess County, but lacked witnesses or phone data verification. When matching all factors, vehicle characteristics, travel routes, shoe prints, camping habits, tool skills, and reclusive lifestyle, the investigation team assessed Caleb Rourke as standing out far above the other 6 subjects, becoming the central suspect, requiring thorough investigation in the next phase. As soon as Caleb Rourke was identified as the primary suspect, the forensics team immediately began comparing all samples collected from the cabin with biometric data and physical evidence traceable to this individual. The first comparison platform was DNA. Caleb's profile had a biological record from an administrative violation in 2014 related to illegal camping, and although it was not a full criminal record, the oral epithelial sample stored in the Utah Department of Natural Resources system was still usable. When the lab processed the mixed DNA samples from key locations inside the cabin, including skin cells from the door handle, smudged fingerprints on the stove, short dark brown hair strands collected from under the bed, and cellular material adhering to the paracord segment, a foreign DNA profile appeared repeatedly at 5 different locations. When this sample was run through the expanded CODIS system and internal databases, the markers matched 1-1 with Caleb's stored sample, with a random match probability lower than 1 in 7.8 billion. More importantly, the DNA appeared primarily at points the victim could not reach from inside, confirming this was not a random coincidence, but evidence of direct interaction by the cabin's operator. Next, the investigation team moved to bootprint comparison. During surveillance of Caleb, the team noted he owned 2 pairs of heavy-duty hiking boots from Vask and Danner, sizes 11.5 and 12, both consistent with the estimated size of the boot prints collected at the cabin. When executing a search warrant on Caleb's garage in Oakley, technicians discovered a pair of Danner Mountain Light boots in size 12 that had been heavily used over the years, with the outer sole worn slightly to the right. This was exactly the wear pattern seen in the casts of boot prints around the cabin. The outer tread grooves worn deeper than the inner ones. The rubber compound on the sole also matched perfectly with the 3D boot print pattern, including a small crescent-shaped cut on the left sole that corresponded to a dent previously identified at the cabin's doorstep. The degree of match made the possibility of substitution with another pair of boots virtually zero. Tool mark analysis further strengthened the suspicion. In Caleb's garage, the forensics team seized a toolkit including a small chainsaw, wood chisels, a hand plane, a large flathead screwdriver, a hammer, and an old box of metal screws of a type no longer widely produced. When comparing the cuts on the firewood stack next to the cabin with Caleb's chainsaw blade, they found the distinctive double groove pattern matched exactly, a rare feature due to the blade being nicked lightly at 2 symmetrical points. This characteristic was recreated in the lab for confirmation and yielded absolute accuracy. Similarly, the planing marks on the wood block, used as a table support in the cabin, had uniform depth and a slight curved trajectory, matching the hand plane from the garage, which had worn in a characteristic direction, a right-handed user with a slight pull to the left. The V-shaped chisel marks on the inside of the cabin door also matched the angle and width of the chisel tip in the toolkit, especially when comparing the chipped edge from a previous drop or impact, creating identical scratch patterns on the cabin's wood surface. The external metal latch mechanism on the cabin used #14 flathead round screws, manufactured around 2008-2010, matching the remaining screws in Caleb's toolbox, including similar oxidation marks. Such similarities in tool marks and materials not only indicated that Caleb's tools had been used at the cabin, but also showed in many cases distinctive wear patterns that could only be produced by a single unique tool, a highly persuasive forensic indicator. Concurrent with the tool analysis, the investigation team traced the origins of items inside the cabin. Through credit card receipts and store cameras, they tracked the purchase history of specific items, a gray 550 paracord spool, sold only once at a tool store in Camas in July 2017, to a buyer matching Caleb. Canyon View Foods canned goods found in the cabin matched a bulk purchase by Caleb at a discount store in Heber City. A small MaxFire fuel canister, discovered next to the wood box in the cabin, matched a transaction on September 2, 2018, coinciding with camera footage recording Caleb's vehicle entering the forest. Even a green marker pen used to date items on the cabin's food shelf was identified as the same type Caleb purchased with cash in Park City. Other distinctive items, such as canvas work gloves with fibers remaining in the cabin, and on the paracord segment. Also matched samples Caleb kept in his tool bin. Analysis of machine oil stains on the stove showed they matched the composition of the chainsaw lubricant Caleb purchased regularly. Finally, the forensics team examined cabin maintenance habits through repair traces. New screws from 2-3 years prior matched Caleb's receipts for individual screw purchases. The smoothed hinge surfaces matched the use of a large screwdriver with strong counterclockwise torque, a habit clearly shown in CCTV footage of Caleb repairing a wooden gate at a ranch. All comparative analyses, from DNA, boot prints, tool marks, to item origins, converged on the same conclusion. The cabin not only bore traces of Caleb's presence, but also exhibited continuous matches from the microscopic level to behavioral patterns. There was no discrepancy in the chain of comparisons, and each matching category had high exclusionary power, forming a solid forensic foundation for determining the cabin was the detention facility built, maintained, and directly operated by Caleb throughout the 4 years of Emily's disappearance. After all forensic comparisons between the cabin and Caleb Rourke achieved absolute matches, the investigation team moved to the arrest preparation phase with a requirement for absolute safety, as the suspect was assessed to have high wilderness survival skills and familiarity with sharp tools. The Summit County prosecutor submitted to the court a dossier requesting an emergency arrest warrant, detailing the chain of DNA evidence matching at 5 cabin locations, boot prints matching Caleb's size 12 Danner Mountain Light boots, tool marks from the chainsaw and chisels, matching tools seized from his Oakley garage, and a series of cabin items directly purchased by Caleb. The arrest warrant was approved the same day, accompanied by search warrants for his vehicles and all property. The Summit County SWAT team was deployed under a low-visibility apprehension plan to avoid provoking the suspect. According to records, Caleb had no fixed residence, so the command team set up 2 ambush points, one at the Oakley garage, where he often returned to repair tools, and the other at a private woodworking site west of Kamaz, where surveillance showed his most frequent appearances in the past 2 months. At 6:12 a.m., Caleb's Ford F-250 pickup was identified approaching a dirt road near the woodworking site. SWAT immediately deployed interception teams from 2 directions to prevent the suspect from fleeing into the forest, while sniper teams maintained overhead observation for risk control. As Caleb stepped out of the vehicle, carrying his toolkit, the capture team activated a dynamic entry, but without excessive force. A group approached from behind, securing the suspect's arms with a shoulder joint control technique before he could reach his tool shed. During the takedown, Caleb did not resist strongly, only asking what's going on, but SWAT maintained full safety protocols due to the suspect's unpredictable assessment. After handcuffing, the investigation team read the arrest warrant, stating preliminary charges related to kidnapping, prolonged unlawful imprisonment, and suspected physical abuse. At the scene, the Ford F-250 was sealed and towed to the examination center to check travel traces, soil samples under the chassis, fabric fibers in the cab, and potential retention of evidence from transporting Emily 4 years earlier. In the truck bed, the search team recovered 2 small Maxfire fuel canisters, a bag containing leftover gray 550 paracord, and several woodworking tools, still bearing sawdust matching the wood type in the cabin. All were sealed and documented. Simultaneously, SWAT executed the search at the Oakley garage. Additional #14 nails from the 2008-2010 production period, identical to those in the cabin, were seized, along with a pair of canvas gloves bearing fibers matching samples from the cabin. Following the arrest, Caleb was transferred to the Summit County Sheriff's Office temporary detention facility. There, the suspect underwent intake procedures, fingerprinting, a second DNA swab for system verification, and transfer to initial interrogation. In the interrogation room, Caleb maintained a guarded demeanor, limited communication, showed anxiety, but tried to remain calm. The investigation team did not immediately reveal cabin details, but started with questions about his recent activities and commonly used forest routes. When asked about his pickup truck and habits on Upper Setting Road and Soapstone Basin routes, Caleb responded vaguely, saying he went for some fresh air. When the investigator mentioned forensic samples from the cabin indicating his direct presence, Caleb fell silent, requested an attorney, marking the end of the first interrogation session. Although Caleb was uncooperative, the entire arrest process, vehicle, and additional evidence collection all closed properly under procedure, officially bringing the suspect into legal custody and opening the charging phase based on the solidly established forensic evidence block prior to the warrant. In extended sessions over multiple days with a special investigation team and a clinical psychologist, Emily Hart's complete statement was recorded step by step to reconstruct the 4-year captivity journey in the cabin hidden deep in the Uinta Mountains, with many details precisely matching the previously collected forensic evidence chain. Emily described that on the afternoon of her disappearance, after standing at the junction turning into Wall Lake Loop to check her map, she continued northward a short distance when she encountered a man wearing a dark jacket, an old baseball cap, and carrying a large backpack, standing close to a pine thicket as if trying to avoid attention. The man asked if she was looking for the Lake Loop Trail and said there was a less rocky shortcut if she took a small western side trail. Since her sister had advised asking for directions if lost, Emily thought it was normal guidance from another hiker. When she turned onto the narrow trail, the man followed about several dozen steps behind. Emily said she felt nothing alarming in those initial moments. However, as the path became increasingly overgrown and lost clear markings, Emily turned to ask and was suddenly pushed hard from behind. According to her account, she only heard rushing footsteps, then was grabbed around the waist and dragged into the dense pines. A hand clamped over her mouth with a rough canvas glove smelling of machine oil, a detail matching the oil samples found in the cabin and Caleb Rourke's toolkit. Emily said the attacker acted very quickly, as if he had planned the escape route, because immediately after subduing her, he dragged her onto a dark side trail and made continuous turns to avoid being seen from the main trail. She was dragged a distance, then bound with thin paracord, type 550, gray in color. She immediately recognized the color and material when shown forensic photos because it was the same cord found in the cabin. Emily described the attacker saying nothing beyond short commands: walk fast, don't look, and don't scream. He wrapped a cloth around her head to blindfold her, old fabric smelling of dirt and wood smoke, similar to the odor forensics noted around the cabin. After about 30 minutes of continuous dragging, Emily was loaded onto a pickup truck. She said the truck bed was bumpy, the metal floor cold, and there were clanging sounds from metal tools. This matched the chainsaw and tools in Caleb's truck bed. She couldn't see the route but guessed deeper into the forest due to gravel strongly hitting the undercarriage. When the truck stopped, she was carried out and led into the cabin. Emily described the cabin as small, with a rough wooden bed, a stove, and food shelves, details matching the cabin structure. She remembered most clearly the external latch. I couldn't open it from inside, only heard the strong metal scraping each time he locked it. This information perfectly matched the externally operable latch mechanism described by forensics. In the early days, Emily said she was bound most of the time, fully locked at night, and sometimes untied during the day, but with the door still locked from outside. She was only given canned food, dry noodles, and water from a large container near the door, exactly the supplies found in the cabin. Food provision followed a set cycle. He came every 2 or 3 days, sometimes longer in winter. The match between this appearance cycle and camera data recording Caleb's vehicle on Upper Setting Road 2, 3 times per month, was a critical connection. Emily remembered the perpetrator usually arriving at dusk or dawn, similar to the times the deepest boot prints around the cabin were recorded. Regarding seasonal cabin adjustments, Emily recounted that in winter, the cabin was so cold that breath condensed on the door planks. The perpetrator brought thick blankets, stacked extra dry firewood by the stove, and sometimes added wood panels to gaps between cabin planks to block wind. Forensics had found traces of newer screws and replacement wood from the same periods, so this testimony perfectly matched maintenance signs. In summer, he brought insect repellent spray, nylon bags, and cleared old items from the cabin, consistent with annually cycling trash patterns. Emily said her movement was strictly limited. She was only allowed near the small window in the morning for light, but could not reach the main door. When hearing him arrive, she always clearly heard heavy boot steps on the doorstep, followed by the metal latch sound. The description of heavy boots, thick rubber soles, very steady steps, matched the cabin boot prints and Caleb's Danner Mountain Light boots. When asked about any tool signs inside the cabin, Emily said on a rare occasion he repaired the door. She heard metal sounds, strong screw tightening, and wood chiseling, matching tool marks forensics, linked to chisels and screwdriver from Caleb's garage. She also remembered his gloves, rough gray-brown canvas, old and worn at the thumb, similar to the canvas gloves recovered from the cabin and garage. In the interviews, Emily described the perpetrator's unstable psychology. He didn't talk much, just followed routine. Every cabin visit was the same. Set down the bag, start the fire, check the door, leave food, and go. This matched forensics' assessment that the cabin was maintained as a cyclical detention site rather than a living space. She also said he was very careful concealing the path, often dragging pine branches over the trail when leaving, consistent with the absence of secondary footprints beyond the main boot prints. Emily's statement showed the cabin was seasonally adjusted, regularly maintained with tools matching those from Caleb's garage, food supplied in cycles matching camera data, external locking exactly as forensics described, and boot prints in positions she heard steps each time the perpetrator arrived. The entire statement not only aligned with forensic data, but also filled behavioral gaps over the 4 years, fully reconstructing how Emily was separated from the main trail, controlled, detained, and isolated in an unknown cabin. In the formal interrogation after his attorney was present, Caleb Rourke presented a version completely opposite to Emily's statement and forensic conclusions, attempting to portray the cabin as an unused shelter and denying any detention activity. He claimed the cabin was just a windbreak spot he built years ago while working for a freelance logging crew, and annual repairs were only because sometimes I needed a place to crash when it got cold. Caleb denied any contact with Emily, saying I never saw this girl before the arrest, and argued his DNA in the cabin was obvious because I built it. Regarding hair strands in the cabin, he said hair falls everywhere, normal in a place I stayed occasionally. He tried to explain hand traces on the latch and door by saying the hinges jammed in winter, so he had to tighten them many times. When confronted with matching boot prints, Caleb claimed thousands used the same boot type and soles wear over time, who knows coincident. He also denied using Upper Setting Road or Soapstone Basin over the 4 years, saying the truck was loaned to friends a few times, but when asked for names, he provided no specifics, only vaguely saying they don't want to be dragged into this. However, when comparing Caleb's version to the full forensic chain, contradictions emerged clearly. First, the cabin did not have characteristics of an occasional shelter, but was a structure maintained cyclically, with hinge replacements, screw tightening, wind-blocking wood additions, and nails added exactly when cameras recorded Caleb's vehicle in the forest. If abandoned, there was no reason for 4 years of regular maintenance matching Emily's captivity period. Second, Caleb's DNA appeared not generally, but concentrated at points only the external door operator could touch. Emily's hands could not reach those positions, especially the outer latch surface. Repeated identical DNA at functional points, latch, hinges, handle, indicated ongoing control by the cabin operator, not old traces from years ago. Third, boot prints had specific wear offset, crescent dent, and rubber pattern matching Caleb's Danner boots absolutely. The chance of another pair creating perfect size, wear, pattern, and random dent matches was nearly zero. The thousands used the same boots argument did not explain unique wear formed only by long-term use by one person. Fourth, tools from Caleb's garage, chisels, hand plane, nicked chainsaw blade, matched cabin micro-tool marks to an individually traceable level. No basis existed to equate this specific tool match to other loggers, as Caleb claimed. Woodcuts, planing angles, and chisel grooves all showed manipulation habits, pull force, hand direction, unique to one user. Fifth, Caleb's vehicle appearances on Upper Setting Road perfectly matched Emily's description of perpetrator visits, early morning or dusk, 2-3 days apart, over 4 years. Caleb provided no alibi for any camera-recorded times and could not explain why his truck entered the forest on days the cabin showed fresh canned goods or firewood additions. 6. Emily's statements about machine oil smell on gloves, strong screw sounds, and seasonal reinforcements matched forensic evidence. The victim could not know details like #14 screws or nicked blade, but forensics confirmed they existed as described. Finally, Emily's account of being led via side trail, then loaded into a pickup with metal clanging in the bed, matched the metal tool quantity in Caleb's truck and simulated timing from Crystal Lake Trailhead to cabin. Caleb denied being near Crystal Lake on disappearance day, but 2017 witnesses recorded a dark pickup moving slowly toward the cabin direction at the exact time. And current camera records identified features matching Caleb's Ford F-250. From these clear contradictions, the investigation team built Caleb's motive and behavior profile based on forensic synthesis, an isolated individual, using mountains as personal space, habitually building temporary structures for environmental control, and maintaining the cabin as a cyclical long-term isolation tool. Caleb's denials were assessed as preliminary defense strategy, lacking any evidence, while all forensics and victim testimony linked tightly in logical sequence, his version could not refute. Thus, his behavioral profile was completed, calculated, routine repetitive, tightly controlled, using the cabin to isolate the victim over extended time. After completing the confrontation of Caleb's statements with the entire chain of forensic data, the investigation team entered the critical phase, building a complete charging dossier, in which the entire timeline from the moment Emily disappeared until the cabin was discovered had to be pieced together into an undeniable logical sequence. The first point in the chain was the moment Emily left the Crystal Lake Trailhead at 3:42 p.m. and was last seen through witness testimony on the Wall Lake Loop. Immediately afterward, the time window from 4 o'clock, 5 p.m. coincided with the data gap where Emily no longer appeared on any cameras. The investigation team incorporated into the timeline the side trail that Emily described in her statement, the narrow path leading into the dense forest to the west, and aligned it parallel with the simulated route from that location to the point where the dark-colored pickup truck was seen by the road maintenance worker on Mirror Lake Highway. Around 6 p.m. analysis of travel speed, terrain characteristics, and distance showed that it was entirely feasible for Emily to have been subdued and placed in the truck bed within the short time frame after encountering the perpetrator. Traffic camera footage extracted from 2017 recorded a dark-colored pickup truck entering Upper Setting Road during a time frame close to the signal of the vehicle described by the witness. Subsequent forensic data confirmed that the boot print at the cabin and the boot print photographed in 2017 had a high degree of similarity, allowing a solid hypothesis that the perpetrator had operated the same vehicle for 4 years when entering and exiting the cabin. The next phase of the timeline was the sequence of sustained captivity, pieced together from 3 sources: 2017, 2021 camera data, cabin forensics, and the victim's statement. Cameras recorded Caleb's vehicle entering the forest on a regular cycle, averaging 2-3 times per month. Cabin forensics reflected a similar maintenance rhythm. Every few weeks, new screws were added, firewood was split and replenished, and food supplies were restocked. Emily described the perpetrator visiting the cabin on exactly that cycle, sometimes every 2 days, sometimes every 3, particularly in the early morning and at dusk, matching the time stamps when cameras captured the suspect vehicle. When these 3 layers of data were aligned on the same timeline axis, they formed a tight pattern. Every instance Caleb's vehicle appeared in traffic data corresponded to new signs of cabin use and the victim receiving essential supplies. There were no gaps that made the model disjointed. The fourth layer of the timeline was microscopic forensics. Caleb's DNA appeared on the door latch, hinges, and areas Emily could not reach. Tool marks matched tools in his garage by groups: chainsaw, chisel, hand plane. Boot prints matched by individual wear patterns, and physical evidence like paracord, canned goods, and fuel cans matched Caleb's purchase origins. Combining these with Emily's statement created a cross-reference matrix in which every detail the victim described had a corresponding forensic marker. This was an extremely important element in building the charging dossier, as it proved the victim's statement could not be a product of imagination, but accurately reflected the cabin's structure and operational habits. A team of behavioral analysis experts was brought in to assess the perpetrator's nature and motive. The behavioral analysis report concluded that the cabin was not a temporary shelter, but a closed, controlled environment where the perpetrator designed long-term captivity procedures with features isolating the victim from social contact, limiting light and movement, maintaining a supply cycle without allowing prolonged direct contact, and absolute control of escape routes via external locking mechanisms. The way Caleb seasonally repaired the cabin, sealing gaps in winter, adding items in summer, replacing screws when hinges loosened, was evaluated as evidence of optimizing the captivity environment, characteristic of reclusive perpetrators with a need to establish private power spaces. The behavioral report also pointed out similarities between Caleb's history of illegal camping and the cabin's structure. The same rough wood carving style, the same assembly of scavenged materials, and the same habit of maintaining forest hideouts as hidden personal spaces. The final part of the charging dossier process was integrating all data, forensics, timeline, cameras, GPS, statements, behavior, into a unified report submitted to the prosecutor. The prosecutor required the investigation team to ensure that all links were proven by independent data to avoid points that defense counsel could challenge. The team therefore constructed a detailed timeline with over 200 entries, in which each time marker was attached to a forensic evidence item, camera data, or part of Emily's statement. All footwear evidence, tools, door traces, hair fibers, and items were photographed in high resolution, DNA separated, and attached to expert reports. Every financial transaction of Caleb related to the cabin was extracted, accompanied by store videos were available. Vehicle movements were mapped in real time to prove continuity over 4 years. Upon completion, the charging dossier comprised over 1,500 pages of data, 87 individual forensic reports, 42 camera extracts, and more than 20 hours of Emily's statements. This was the complete basis for the Summit County prosecutor to formally accept the case and prepare for the prosecution phase with the highest level of binding evidence required by law. The trial of Caleb Rourke was scheduled to take place at the Summit County Courthouse, lasting many weeks, with the participation of a jury of 12 members and a series of expert witnesses. On the very first day of the trial, the prosecutor presented the indictment based on the meticulously built charging dossier. The charges included first-degree kidnapping, prolonged unlawful imprisonment, intentional infliction of serious physical harm, and related offenses involving the use of an illegal structure to detain a minor victim. The prosecution began by presenting the comprehensive timeline from the moment Emily left the Crystal Lake Trailhead until she was found in the cabin 4 years later, to provide the jury with a coherent view of the chain of events tightly linked together. While projecting images of the cabin taken immediately after the scene was secured, the prosecutor emphasized that the entire structure, furnishings, and traces inside all aligned with a long-term captivity model rather than a temporary shelter. Next, the forensic team was called to present physical evidence. The DNA expert opened by explaining the method of separating mixed cell samples collected from the door latch, hinges, handles, and paracord items. He pointed out that Caleb's DNA sequence not only appeared scattered, but repeated in multiple functional points the victim could not reach, and the probability of random match with any other person was virtually zero. To make it easy for the jury to understand, the prosecution displayed comparison charts of DNA with Caleb's biological markers, proving the samples could belong to no one else. Next, the footprint expert presented the boot print analysis results. By projecting side-by-side 3D models of the cast boot print at the cabin and the sole of Caleb's Danner Mountain Light boots, the expert highlighted matches at 7 characteristic wear points, 3 outer edge grooves, 1 crescent-shaped indentation, and 4 even wear segments in the pattern of a right-handed person. He explained that these details could not be coincidental from natural wear, but reflected the specific usage process of one individual, with a 100% match level. The prosecutor then called the tool marks expert to the stand. This expert presented the cuts, planing marks, and chisel marks collected at the cabin, comparing them to the tool set in Caleb's garage. He explained that the chainsaw marks had an unusual double groove due to blade nicks at 2 points, and the blade seized from the garage produced identical marks when recreated in the lab. He also compared planing lines on cabin wood surfaces with marks on a practice wood block from Caleb, proving matching pull force, angle, and hand trajectory. Tool marks on door hinges were also projected, showing angle and depth of chisel strikes that could only be created by the chipped-edge chisel head exactly as in the seized garage set. The entire forensic presentation lasted over 3 hours and drew particular attention from the jury due to its specificity and consistency across evidence layers. At the conclusion of the forensic portion, the prosecution called Emily to the stand. With support from a psychological expert to ensure her mental stability, Emily recounted in detail how she was separated from the main trail, subdued and placed in the vehicle, then taken to the cabin and held captive for many years. Her testimony carried not only emotional weight, but also high authenticity, because every detail she described matched forensic data. The smell of machine oil, the sound of tightly screwed bolts, the door latch locking only from outside, gray paracord, the stove and canned goods shelves, the perpetrator's cabin visit cycle. When she described the heavy footsteps each time the perpetrator arrived, the prosecutor immediately projected images of deep boot prints at the doorstep, further reinforcing the alignment between the victim's experience and physical evidence. Following Emily's testimony, expert witnesses, including the medical examiner, psychologist, 2017 SIR personnel, and the fire crew that discovered the cabin, were called for corroboration. Each witness provided a piece of the picture. The doctor confirmed Emily's injuries consistent with prolonged captivity. The psychologist described the formation of sound fear reflexes and behaviors fitting the captive trauma model. The SR worker explained why the cabin was overlooked in the 2017 search. The fire crew described how they discovered the cabin and Emily's condition upon emerging. In the cross-examination phase, defense counsel attempted to focus on 2 points. The cabin could have been used by someone else, and matches in shoes or tools could be random, since many people use similar shoes and tools. The lawyer tried to cast doubt by asking the DNA expert whether the cabin could have traces from some repairman who fixed it in the past. However, the expert affirmed DNA matches at 5 positions the victim could not access, and if unrelated repairmen had worked there, they would have left DNA at typical work areas, not concentrated only at control points like the door latch. When defense counsel raised the commonality of Danner Mountain Light boots in the hiking community, the boot print expert immediately countered, what mattered was not the boot type, but the specific millimeter by millimeter wear pattern. Wear created from thousands of steps by the same individual over years. No 2 different pairs could produce the same configuration of wear, indentations, and micro cracks. Regarding tool marks, defense counsel argued the cabin might have pre-existed, and Caleb's garage tools only happened to be similar. The tool marks expert explained it was not mere similarity, but exact matches in every nick and chip saw line, something that could only occur if the exact same tools were used at the cabin. No second tool on the market could have identical millimeter-level chips. When defense tried to question the vehicle timeline for Caleb, The prosecution immediately projected a map compiling 48 instances of Caleb's vehicle on camera over 4 years, matching the cabin maintenance cycle. Store videos showed Caleb himself purchasing canned goods, paracord, screws, and fuel cans, matching cabin evidence. Next, the prosecution emphasized that Emily's statement perfectly aligned with forensics. The prosecutor argued that no coincidence could exist for a victim's statement, who knew nothing about tool marks, #14 screws, machine oil, paracord, or bootprint patterns, to match every single expert finding. Finally, the prosecution called the behavioral analysis expert to assess the fit between the criminal behavior and evidence. The expert described the cabin bearing all signs of an intentional captivity structure, one-way locking mechanism, light-restricted space, minimal service item arrangement, periodic care, access control, and maintenance cycle corresponding to Caleb's vehicle movements. The expert affirmed this behavioral model did not fit any temporary shelter explanation and only appeared in calculated long-term captivity cases. Concluding the presentation, the prosecution integrated all forensic data, DNA, boot prints, tool marks, physical evidence, cameras, GPS, Emily's statement, into a complete logical chain, pointing out that no single link deviated from Caleb's criminal behavior pattern. This created a solid foundation for the jury to enter deliberations based on a unified, complete, and tight system of evidence. After many weeks of trial and a fully presented evidence system, from DNA, boot prints, tool marks, camera data, financial transactions, Emily's testimony to expert reports on criminal behavior, the jury entered deliberations with the clear understanding that the case did not rest on a single piece of evidence, but on a multi-layered structure of tightly interlocking data. The deliberation process lasted nearly 6 hours, during which the jury reviewed the 3D cabin model, re-examined excerpts of Emily's testimony, cross-checked forensic photos, and evaluated the reasonableness of Caleb Rourke's defense claims. Questions raised in the deliberation room primarily revolved around the linkage between evidence layers and the possibility of a third party, as suggested by the defense. However, each review of the data chain led the jury to the same conclusion: all traces, from microscopic to overall behavior, connected directly to Caleb with no reasonable gap, allowing another individual to be behind the captivity operation. Upon returning to the courtroom, the forepersons stood and read the verdict: "We, the jury, find the defendant Caleb Rourke guilty on all charges." Following this announcement, the court moved to specifying the offenses. For first-degree kidnapping, the jury determined that pulling Emily off the trail, binding her, transporting her by vehicle, and taking her to the cabin was intentional conduct fully fitting the legal definition of kidnapping, with aggravating circumstances. For unlawful imprisonment lasting over 4 years, evidence from the cabin, external locking mechanism, food supply cycle, light restriction, old binding marks on wrists and ankles, was deemed irrefutable, leading to conviction at the most severe level. Physical and mental abuse was confirmed based on Emily's medical records: malnutrition, brittle bones, muscle atrophy, binding scars, and typical psychological reflexes of long-term captivity victims. The court also accepted second-degree assault due to the use of force to subdue Emily from the initial trail encounter. In total, 4 main offense groups were confirmed: first-degree kidnapping, prolonged unlawful imprisonment, intentional infliction of serious physical harm, and intentional assault, along with subsidiary offenses related to illegal structure construction and use of means to facilitate the crime. Moving to sentencing, the judge considered aggravating factors: the multi-year duration of the offense, the degree of victim harm, the systematic calculation and control, the defendant's lack of cooperation, and especially the isolation designed to completely deprive the victim of freedom. The prosecution recommended a combined sentence of 70-80 years, with no parole for the first 35 years, based on the case's severity. Defense counsel continued to argue that Caleb had no prior violent history, and his isolated lifestyle meant he did not fully understand the legal consequences of building the cabin, but the judge rejected this, stating that actions carried out over 4 years demonstrated full awareness of control and impact on the victim, impossible to view as lack of awareness or impulsive acts. In pronouncing the sentence, the judge detailed each part: 40 years for first-degree kidnapping, 20 years for prolonged unlawful imprisonment, 10 years for intentional serious physical harm, 5 years for assault, plus concurrent subsidiary sentences for cabin-related violations and tools. In total, Caleb Rourke was sentenced to 75 years in prison, with no parole eligibility for the first 35 years. The judge emphasized the defendant's conduct not only deprived the victim of freedom, but created a closed control system maintained for 4 years without allowing any escape opportunity. This is one of the most dangerous forms of prolonged captivity this court has handled. The court also assessed Caleb's danger level as high due to his forest survival adaptation, skills in building and maintaining secret structures, and ability to move without leaving clear traces. The psychological evaluation report for the defendant, though showing no severe mental disorder diagnosis, still indicated reclusive behavioral traits, environmental control, and lack of empathy, factors making reoffense risk particularly concerning. Based on this, the judge ordered the defendant to be held in Utah's maximum security facility in the high-risk inmate section to ensure community safety. The trial concluded with a unanimous jury verdict and a long-term sentence, legally ending the 4-year captivity and multi-year investigation, a case in which the evidence system, testimony, and forensics created a nearly absolute tight-charging dossier. After the trial concluded and Caleb Rourke was officially sentenced, the focus shifted to the long-term recovery process of Emily Hart, a phase that required years of treatment and ongoing support from a professional team, family, and community. Immediately after her rescue, Emily underwent months of medical treatment to address severe malnutrition, prolonged vitamin D deficiency, and low bone density caused by living in an environment without natural light for 4 years. Doctors developed a gradual nutritional plan, combined with physical therapy to improve muscle strength, balance, and mobility, skills that had deteriorated due to being confined in a small cabin for an extended period. Alongside physical treatment, Emily had to confront the profound psychological impact of her long-term captivity. Mental health experts described her as exhibiting typical symptoms of PTSD, startling strongly at sudden noises, fear of being confined in enclosed spaces, obsessions with metallic sounds, and anxiety reactions when seeing unfamiliar men standing near doors. Re-establishing simple habits, such as sleeping in a room with an open window, stepping into open spaces, or taking evening walks, all required guided, step-by-step therapeutic intervention. A crucial part of the recovery process came from the role of her family. Emily's parents received support from the psychological team to understand how to help their daughter reintegrate without adding pressure. They learned to use safe language, avoid situations that might trigger memories of the cabin, and ensure the new living environment always had clear escape routes so Emily could feel in control of her surroundings. Friends and the community in Camas also showed strong support, organizing financial and emotional assistance activities, but at the experts' recommendation, they were guided on how to interact without overwhelming Emily, especially while she was gradually rebuilding her sense of normalcy. The impact of the case extended beyond Emily and prompted significant changes in investigation practices and management of the Crystal Lake Trailhead area. The cabin, which had been the site of her captivity and contained important forensic evidence, was completely demolished per court order to prevent it from becoming a gathering spot or being illegally reused. The Forest Service conducted a full review of all side trails and unmarked turnoffs around Crystal Lake and Upper Setting Road, installing additional warning signs about straying from the main path and the risk of getting lost in the dense northwestern forest where the cabin once stood. Drawing lessons from the incident, Utah's State Search and Rescue Agency updated its search protocols to reduce the chance of overlooking structures not shown on official maps, including the deployment of aerial thermal scanning technology and more detailed topographic mapping in the early days of search operations. The case's influence also led the local hiking community to heighten awareness, emphasizing traveling in groups and reporting itineraries to the ranger station before setting out. For Emily, the recovery journey continued for many years, but gradually opened new paths. After more than a year of treatment, her health improved markedly, bone density scans showed positive progress, and her fear of enclosed spaces lessened through controlled exposure therapy. Emily began participating in support groups for survivors of long-term captivity, where she could talk with others who had similar experiences and share strategies for overcoming trauma. She also slowly rebuilt normal daily habits, learning to drive, hiking with professional guides, and joining art therapy classes to restore her ability to express emotions. When she felt ready, Emily chose to share her journey in a community program on outdoor safety, focusing on warning signs to recognize while traveling in mountainous forest areas. Although she did not want to become a public figure or build an identity tied to the case, sharing in a limited scope helped her regain a sense of agency over her own story. More recently, Emily enrolled in a psychology counseling program with the long-term goal of supporting others who have experienced severe psychological trauma. Her family and treatment team view this as a sign that she has come a long way from her initial withdrawn and fearful state. Her current life is not entirely free from the shadows of the past, but her mental stability, physical recovery, and clear direction for the future show that Emily has gradually regained control over her own life. While the moment she stepped out of the cabin in 2021 marked the end of 4 years of captivity, Emily's true journey has been the long recovery that followed, a process she has navigated with remarkable resilience and the steadfast support of those who always believed she could reclaim her life. The story of Emily Hart is not only a complex criminal case, but also a reflection of many issues present in contemporary American life, from personal safety during outdoor activities and vigilance when traveling alone to the importance of community and emergency response systems. The fact that Emily was separated from the trail at Crystal Lake Trailhead simply because she trusted directions from a stranger serves as a reminder that danger can exist even in places that seem safe, such as national parks or familiar forests. Details from the case: the dark-colored pickup truck seen on Mirror Lake Highway at the exact time, the secret off-map cabin, the perpetrator's cyclical behavior patterns reveal how dangerous individuals can exploit geographic gaps, isolation, and visitors' casual habits to commit crimes without drawing attention. In a context where Americans continue to favor hiking, camping, and backpacking in vast natural areas, the first lesson is to never go alone without clearly informing at least one trusted person of the itinerary, expected return time, and contact information. Emily had reported her plans, but did not carry a GPS device, a gap that today can be addressed with compact, affordable satellite trackers that are now more widely available. Second, the case highlights the danger of veering off the main trail or trusting directions from strangers in the woods, especially on unmarked routes that do not appear on maps. Emily's decision to take a shortcut was the starting point that led to her isolation and being drawn into an area out of sight. This is an important reminder for every hiker in the United States. The main trail is the most critical safety factor, and any unfamiliar side path should be avoided unless reliably verified. Third, from a community perspective, Emily's discovery, thanks to a wildfire crew spotting unusual smoke, underscores the importance of rapid response teams and frontline personnel who inadvertently play a key role in missing persons cases. This emphasizes the value of supporting training programs, funding, and maintenance for SAR teams, firefighters, and the Forest Service, forces that stand on the line between safety and danger in the wilderness. Finally, Emily's recovery journey reminds us that long-term mental health support is indispensable. Some injuries are not visible to the eye, such as Emily's fear of footsteps or inability to tolerate enclosed spaces. This reflects the reality in the United States that post-trauma mental health care still needs greater attention and investment. From this case, individuals can draw the lesson that preparation, vigilance, community connection, and respect for mental health are not mere general advice, but factors that protect life and human dignity in the most fragile situations. Thank you for following this haunting yet hopeful story of Emily Hart's survival journey. If you want to continue joining us for true investigative stories like this, please remember to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video, where we will continue exploring cases that remind us of the importance of vigilance and the power of community.